Hello and welcome along to the Jumps Racing podcast here for episode 3, which is quite surreal to an extent because it doesn't seem a couple of minutes ago that it was here for episode 1. We've had great feedback. I know you've all been enjoying the podcast so far, and hopefully episode 3 here will be another cracker. Now, we're going to look back at what we saw on Saturday at Wincanton, plus we're going to review what we saw at Aintree and also at Navan on Sunday, and then we'll look ahead to the action at Cheltenham over the Friday, Saturday and a Sunday period. I'm Bobby Beevers, as always. I'm here with Nick Seddon. Nick, good to see you. We'll come to it very shortly, but what a cracking weekend of racing we saw.
Hello, Bobby. Yeah, good to see you. And as you say, these episodes are coming thick and fast now, aren't they? Really feels like we're well and truly in the national hunt season now. I think we've said that every single week so far, but Cheltenham coming up always feels like the jumps are back. And crikey, we didn't half get a treat of national hunt action last week either, because where do you start in terms of Cheltenham clues from Navan on Sunday? In an absolute abundance.
It certainly is indeed. You mentioned there about the jump season started to take some effect. For me, I always say, as soon as the Charlie Hall hits, that's when the jump season really starts to get going. Of course, the flat season, you could say, finished early this year with the abandonment of Doncaster on Saturday. Nick, let's look back then at what we saw on Saturday first at Wincanton. Started with that elite hurdle, Fusel Raffles and Grand Sancy.
Yeah, the Elite Hurdle is a race that is considered a champion hurdle trial, but traditionally tends to produce more of a lively outsider, really, than a bona fide contender for the champion hurdle. And this one was a small field affair, and it really quickly turned into a match race, as you say, between a Nicky Henderson trained horse, Fusel Raffles, and a Paul Nicholls trained horse in Grand Sancy. Much like the season, it was Henderson against Nicholls. And I must admit, I was really impressed with this winner, Fusel Raffles, who showed a lot of grit and determination to win the race. He was an excellent juvenile last season. He didn't go to Cheltenham and Aintree, so a certain stable mate took big advantage of that. Pentland Hills won both, but he won at Punchestown. He's a Grade 1 winning juvenile, and I thought there was a lot to like about this. He was made to work hard by Grand Sancy, but there's no shame in that. He's a really consistent type, and I think he'll really come on for this. He's beaten a solid yardstick, and I think there is plenty more to come from him yet. He's been quoted at around 12-1, 14-1 for the champion hurdle on the back of winning this. And I do think that this year, the Elite Hurdle has produced a bona fide, lively outsider for the champion hurdle.
Well, how do you rate his chance? Listen, I know, we're here now in November. The champion hurdle's not till day one of the festival. But as we are recording this now, how would you rate his chance in the champion hurdle?
Well, I think the 2-mile hurdling division is getting more and more open all the time. We very sadly lost last year's winner, Espoir de Lem. I think Beevers there for the taking, for all that he probably still is at the top of the division at the moment. Well, I imagine he's going to go for the fighting fifth next month, so we'll learn more about him then, or the end of this month. I think I'd be brave enough to say that I would put him in the same bracket as Pentland Hills at the moment. So certainly, I think there's a lot to like about what he did. He'll come on for it, and hopefully he can build up into a real Grade 1 winning 2-miler, this season.
The Badger Beers as well. Unfortunately, there was no third win for Present Man, but it did go to Paul Nicholls nevertheless with Give Me a Copper. Now, they've actually come out and said, Nick, that the long-term... The long term for him, should I say, for Give Me a Copper, will be the Grand National in April. So they're already thinking about the world's biggest steeplechase in November.
Yeah, at first glance you think, crikey, that's long-term planning. But then you see that this horse is owned or part-owned by Sir Alex Ferguson. So really, it makes sense that he would be targeting a big prize in Liverpool, because he is no stranger to winning a big prize on Merseyside. Nice to see him having a good horse. Remember, he had What a Friend a few years ago, who we all know how good he was. And there was a lot to like about Give Me a Copper. Hopefully they've sussed it now with him, because he was pretty lightly raced before this term. He only had 3 starts last season after a really long break. I think it's worth noting that he does seem to have been well liked, because he was well back for the Ultima back at the last season's festival and the Bet365 Gold Cup. And there's probably still a lot more handicap scope with him yet. He's gone up £6 for winning this, so he'll be 148 next time. I can see the logic behind the Grand National tote. He looks built for stamina.
Yeah.
I think he's got a long way to go yet before he builds up into a bona fide national horse. So I'd imagine the Beecher would be a good port of call
I
for
was
him.
about to say that. What do you think they'll go for the beach, which I think it's the first Saturday of December, that isn't it? So it's the I think it's like 7th of December or something.
Something like that, yeah. I think it's Saturday the 30th and of November, and then the 6th or 7th of December. So that should be really informative. We brought the Beecher every week so far with lots of names that we think could go there. It could be a real cracking renewal, and you'd imagine that if he's going to go for the national, he's right in the mix. But this is the sort of race I think the form of this could work out really well.
Will you be at Aintree for the Beach Chase this year?
I will. I think we've talked off camera, haven't we? That it's both one of our favourite meetings of the year. I think you've said you won't be able to come this year, so more food in the press room for me, Bob.
Work has taken me to Sandown on the same day for the Tingle Creek, but you do get some nice food down at Sandown as well. But there'll be more for other people in the press room. Let's just say at Aintree. Stay with Aintree as well. Of course, they staged also a meeting on Saturday as well, and Top Notch was a very impressive win. It was a cracking finish in the end as well.
Yeah, Aintree was slightly down the bill this time around. Didn't have the limelight that like it normally does, but it probably produced the finish of the weekend, didn't it? It was a blinding finish to that hurdle between Top Notch, Roxana, and Vision de Flow. And I mean, I watched the race back, and Top Notch just looked beaten when he made a mess of the flight and got headed by Vision de Flow, and he showed all of that will to get back up the line in a real three-way humdinger. And there's so much to like about Top Notch. His wins, I've just listed them out. Scilly Owls, Oaksey Chase, Peterborough Chase, 1965 Chase, and he's shown how versatile he is, but here by winning over hurdles. I don't think he'll stay over hurdles because he flopped in the Stayers hurdle back in March. So I imagine he'll go back over fences, but he's really likeable, he's really versatile, and there are plenty more graded honours to go at with him yet.
Yeah, very much looking forward to see where Top Notch ends up throughout the season. Now, if we look at the action, what we saw on Sunday, and we look at Navan, it's a case really, Nick, of where do we start? And I think the first one to start was the first impressive win of the day. That was in that Grade 3 novices hurdle over 2 miles. And Abacadabra returned the 9-10 favourite for Gordon Elliott and Robbie Power. Very impressive, in my opinion.
A very impressive pronunciation as well. You were worrying before we came on, and you've nailed that one. So
when the pressure was on, Nick, when the pressure was on.
I won't be mentioning the name of that horse, but he ran it in really lofty levels in bumpers last year, Grade 1 contests, and he's now 2 for 2, and that was again a flawless display. Visually, very, very impressive. He's now got a graded win on his belt. And he won by 3 lengths without really having to be asked for everything. So, he's one of very many fine novice hurdling prospects of the Gordon Elliott team. He's, triple, quadruple, so many hands in that division. He's got lofty quotes for the Supreme. He's 14, 16 for the Ballymore, 25 for the Albert Bartlett. But let's not get too carried away with that. He's a good prospect, and I imagine he'll be going for a Grade 1 sooner rather than later.
The race after that, the Grade 2 hurdle over 2.5 miles. Bacardi's was the winner at 100 to 30 for Willie Mullins and Paul Town. And Apple's Jade, relatively disappointing finishing second. Just looking at the stats here, as well with Apple J. She's actually been a beaten favourite in her last 4 ounces. The first of those was in the champion hurdle. Yeah,
she's turning into a bit of a heartbreaker, isn't she, Apple's Jake? Because she's one of the most liked mares in training. We know how talented she is, but she's letting punters down at the moment. That's the 4th time in a row now that, as you say, she's failed to deliver. And she was 4 to 1 on Sunday. Not only did she get edged out by Bacardi, she got blown away by Bacardi's. So the writing is very much on the wall. I've seen a lot of people mention, even as dramatic as it might be time to retire her. I sort of see the logic with that, but at the same time, she's still 7. If it was me, I still think she's got a lot to offer. I'd consider maybe putting her away and aiming her at her own races in her own sex. But at the same time, she's won each of the last three renewals of she's won 3 renewals even of the Hatton's Grace Hurdle, which is at Fairyhouse next month, over 2.5 miles. I imagine the temptation will be to send her there. I probably wouldn't, but it wouldn't shock me at all if she did line up.
Ballyosheen was a winner as well, beating a Plutard on the card. That was another cracking race to enjoy as well.
It was, yeah. It had a lot of big names in there in the market, really. The 2-star attractions seemed to be that of the Arkle winner, 2 Cheltenham winners, in the Arkle winner, Duc de Genèvre, and the Close Brothers winner, a Plutard. My French GCC really serving me well there. And they were ground into submission by this Ballyosheen, who's now won this race 2 years on the run. Yeah. He's the sort of type that, he's been kept busy all autumn for the 2nd year running as well. He's come here bang on it, and he's put those 2 to the sword really well. He found the grade 1 over Christmas that is just a sponsor's name, Paddy Rewards Club Chase. That was too hot an assignment for him last time, but on the evidence of what he did on Sunday, you imagine that'll be the target again, and that's probably the obvious port of call next. But I wouldn't give up on the other 2. I think a Plutard, it was probably a bit too sharp for him. The race on Sunday was over 2 miles. His Close Brothers, is it 2.5 miles? The Close Brothers?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So you imagine he will get stepped up in trip sooner or later. And I mean, Duc de Genèvre, I'm guessing he must have needed it because he was scintillating in the Arkle last year. I imagine he'll come on for the run, and he's definitely worth another chance, for the William Mullins team.
The 3:15 was a beginner's chase. Fakir Duderies was the winner for JP McManus, Joseph O'Brien, and Mark Walsh as well. It's 1 from 1, 100% record for the fences there. There's a lot to like about this performance, in my opinion. The way that he travelled, the way he won the race as well. I actually backed him for the Supreme back in March, but I think he's got a very exciting season ahead over fences.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it was really exciting to see him go in the Supreme last year because, of course, he was a juvenile, a 4-year-old, and his connections thought that he was talented enough to bypass the Triumph, which looked pretty hot. I think Sir Eric was an odds-on favourite for the same connections JP owned, so he went for the Supreme, and he ran really well. And he ran really well. And there was so much to like about this winning debut in a beginning chase. And it's worth noting as well for pointers that this was won in 2017-18 by a certain Footpad who went on to win the Arkle. So the foundations for success are there. But he jumped really well. He travelled and jumped really well. And I tell you what, he took a real notable scalp as well in Mellon, who we know all about. He was second in each of the last 3 Cheltenham Festivals, twice in the Champion Hurdle and once in the Supreme Novices Hurdle. That's no mean feat on your chasing debut, and he's versatile in terms of trip, and the world looks to be his oyster over fences this year.
We're going to look now ahead to the action at Cheltenham on Friday, Saturday and Sunday. So what we're going to do here, we'll look at one race per day, just so it's not like a 4-hour jumps racing podcast. So starting first then with the Friday, and you like the look of one in the cross country. You think it could be one for the French?
Yeah, I do. It's good racing for all of the 3 days at the Cheltenham Festival. And as you say, we'll be here all week if we tried to preview every single race. But, I mean, other races, there's a Ballymore trial on the Friday, but I think the cross-country race could be really interesting. It's a sort of division that definitely requires a specialist. I know that there's a certain Tiger Roll that will be eyeing this up later in the season, but he's not here. So there is definitely an opportunity here for someone to pick up a decent bit of prize money. And I think the thing about this division is that a lot of chasers come here when they've got nowhere to go. So none more so than a certain Yanworth. He's switched to the Ender Bolger team. He's going to be interesting just because Ender Bolger has a marvellous record in these types of races. But Yanworth, we know all about him. He's very talented, but he's been disappointing now for longer than I can remember. He's going to have a lot to prove. So another one worthy of a mention is Dawson City. He's a real dour stayer. He tries this discipline for the first time. He's twice won that Devon National at Exeter that really requires stamina. If he takes to the fences, he could be on a decent mark, for all that he'll probably need the run. But the one that's caught my eye here is a French raider. Now, the French have a pretty good record in these cross-country races. They've come over a few times and won these sorts of prizes. And the one that's caught my eye is called Easy's Land, who arrives here in wonderful form. He's won his last 4 outings. And most recently, it was a listed race over in France in this code. He's a strong stayer. The trip will be fine. And he comes here off a mark of 130, so he's quite way down in the weights. I think his price at 12-1 is a fair one. He could prove well treated, and he could be the way to go in what is a really wide open race, and you can make a case of plenty. So an each way dart with Easy's Land.
Moving on to this Saturday then, and all eyes will be on the BetVictor Gold Cup. At the time of recording, Slate House is the market principal here for the Colin Tizard Yard. It's his second run on Saturday after a wind-up, and I've said on a previous podcast I was actually there at Cheltenham a couple of years ago when he won at the opening meeting. He did the same again this year as well. I think there is a big win in him. I just question whether or not it's going to be this Saturday, Nick.
Yeah, punters seem to agree with you because they seem to think it's coming this Saturday. I mean, it was really hard not to be impressed with him last month at Cheltenham. He absolutely bolted up and seemed to have loads in hand as well. It was really tricky conditions, but I don't know. I just get the feeling that the secret's out with him a bit, that he perhaps won a little bit too well. He's been hounded by the handicapper. He's been given a £12 rise, which means this is going to be a real tough assignment in what is one of the most competitive handicaps of the entire season. But the vibes from the yard are strong. The Tizards, Colin and Joe, have both come out and said really good things about him. He's still lightly raced. There's probably more to come from him yet. He's going to have a favourites chance, but it's a big ask off the weight he's got.
Siri Delaki is also prone into the market as well for Nick Williams, of course, undefeated last year. Nick, he did win the plate at the Cheltenham Festival.
Yeah, really on a roll, isn't he? I think he's won 6 of his last 7 starts.
It's like he's forgot what it's like to lose, isn't it?
Oh, I know, yeah, he's on absolute fire, and to be honest, it's hard to knock him. He's done nothing but progress now for 2 years, and I mean, I've noted down here that he's improved officially 38 pounds in the process of racking up this sequence of form. He's going to come. He's won it fresh in the past. He's got a course and distance success under his belt when he won the plate. I think the main point here is I really hope that Lizzie Kelly's going to be fit to ride him, because she was in the post the other day. She's coming back from a broken arm, I think. So there's a real race against time for her to be fit to ride him. For all that, she shouldn't rush. I hope that she is back in time to continue the partnership.
Spirit of the Games for the Dan Skelter. We talk about the plate there now. Spirit of the Games. He was actually third in that race behind Siri Delak.
Yeah, very, very consistent handicapper, isn't he? He's likely to run his race. He's probably weighted as such. He was flying a bit too high in Grade 1 company at Aintree when he was last seen, but he was he's a great yardstick, and he's likely to run well again. Really, he's worth his price.
Us and them. I've seen a bit of support in the market for the Joseph Brian yard. I just had the one run so far, and that came in the champion chase at Goldrun Park, the Grade 2.
Yeah, Joseph O'Brien, I mean, he's won everything at the moment, isn't he? He seems to win, so it'd be no surprise to see him go well in this as well. Us and them was a really smart novice last season. A string of placed efforts in Grade 1 company, including the Arkle. This is his handicap debut, but I think his mark is pretty feasible. He comes here off 152, and you just can't discount him. Joseph O'Brien can do nothing wrong. He's a really likeable type, but no surprise to see him run well.
St Calvados is fastly becoming a favourite of mine. Over the jumps for the Harry Whitting yard. So pleased to see him return back to winning form last time out. Actually quietly fancied him a couple of years ago at Cheltenham. That was in the Arkle, the year that footpad did win it. But I've followed him ever since, and it's great to see him return back to action. I think he's a great. I think there's 2 horses in the field which I think have got each way written all over it. The first of those is St. Calvados, should he turn up. And the other one we'll talk about later. But I think St. Calvados is a great each way, should he run in the BetVictor on Saturday.
Yeah, that's a good point you make, Bobby, because he is, of course, entered a Shloer Chase as well. And it will be interesting to see where he goes because, he is really likeable. I think it's hard not to like front-running types. And I agree with you. He really is great. And he ran with loads of credit in lots of tough assignments last year. He's a sort of, I always say the term bottom topper, but he's at the bottom of the top class, very much so. And he took the drop back into handicap company in his stride last time at Cheltenham. Marvellous performance off a mega weight to win. And he's got a similar assignment here. He's been risen £4. So it's, all things considered, it's probably a fair rise. He's probably on the right sort of mark because he is a top class animal. But it's a big old weight to lump round here. But he's going to be there on the premises.
Count Merrybell for the Nigel Twiston-Davies yard. He's actually undefeated, Count Merrybell. Let me just say this right. He's undefeated in his previous 2 runs over course and distance. Okay, so obviously we know we saw him run at the Cheltenham Festival in the RSA, but prior to that, he had 2 runs over C&D and he won both. So he's not undefeated at Cheltenham in the last couple of runs, but he's undefeated over course and distance. Just need to emphasise that just so nobody tries to pull me up about it. So he's undefeated over C&D.
Yeah, this lineup seems to be chock full of smart novices from last year. We'll come to Knocknanas next, but Count Merrybell's another one. He was no match for Lost in Translation at Carlisle on reappearance last time, but I think we said last week we think we might have seen the Gold Cup winner, so there's no shame in that. He's a smart performer in his own right. He's got that run now under his belt, and his mark looks a workable one. He'll strip fitter for that run at Carlisle. There's a lot to like about his attitude and how he approaches his races. And I've forgotten what the stat is you gave me about course and distances or something or other, but he's unbeaten in one stretch or another. He's bound to run well.
Not a news for Gary Moore. Could he be the one on Saturday to run well at a big price?
Yeah, well, I've sort of said already I've got a soft spot for front runners, so it's no surprise that Knocknanas comes under this, and he's another one who was a novice last term and was behind St Calvados last time and third. But the key thing with him is that unlike St Calvados, he arrives here on a much lower mark, and he's only been risen £2 from that run at Cheltenham last time. I think his mark is a really workable one. I think he's got a big pot in him. I think he is a smart horse. If I remember, did he win really well at Plumpton last year, off the top of my head? I think he did. There's one performance from him as a novice that always sticks with me, and I think there is still more to come from him. It isn't hard to envisage him pouring it on from the front, and I think sooner rather than later he will strike off his current mark.
And the other horse I wanted to mention, I think, is a great each way shout, is Guitar Pete for the Nicky Richards yard. I like what you're doing there. Guitar Pete, of course, returned back to winning ways in that listed race at Wetherby last time out. He'd won that for a second time in his career, and he really comes to life at this meeting, and also at the Caspian Caviar as well, which of course he did win the Caspian Caviar a couple of seasons ago. Now, the interesting thing with Guitar Pete is that when he ran in this race a couple of years ago, he got hampered at the first, so his chance pretty much went straight away. He finished third in the race 12 months ago, and I think he's a cracking each way shout. He just comes to life in these races in the BetVictor, and should he turn up in the Caspian Caviar as well, it comes to life in that as well. Each way for me.
Yeah, couldn't put it better myself, Bobby. As you say, he's a real established name in this game, isn't he? I think he's 9 now. Really likeable chaser, and roared back to success, roared back to form even last time with a good run at Wetherby. He's risen £6 for that. He'd asked a bit more, but he's a really likeable performer, and he is banging the mix. Looks a brilliant each way chance at about 14-1.
Sticking with the BetVictor then, let's hear now from BetVictor's racing PR, Sam Boswell.
So it's the November meeting at Cheltenham this weekend, headlined, of course, by the BetVictor Gold Cup. And I'm delighted to say I'm joined on the line now by Sam Boswell from the sponsors BetVictor. Hello, Sam.
Hi, mate. How's it going?
Yeah, very, very good, thank you. Busy week for you at BetVictor, I imagine.
Yeah, I feel like I've been here, there and everywhere hyping the race. And to be fair, it doesn't need much hyping. I think we've got a really good renewal. Maybe would have liked to see a couple more runners from over the sea. It's the one thing that perhaps the race has lacked in recent years. But there's plenty of good representation, and I think it's going to be a really competitive affair.
Yeah, it looks a brilliant renewal on paper at the time of recording. And we'll get straight into it and chat about the BetVictor Gold Cup, because the market, as you'd expect, is a wide open one on Tuesday afternoon, one that's headed by the Colin Tizard trained Slate House, who, Sam, seems to be being back like defeat is out of the question at the moment.
Yeah, worst result in the book for ourselves. Good result for punters if he was to go in. Interestingly enough, we opened the book a while back. We like to try and go up, and it's a really difficult race to try and work out at sort of October time. We put Slate House in an initial 33-1, and very quickly a couple of people seemed to really be keen on him at the price. Ended up before that Cheltenham run, I think he was about 16-1 with us before the Cheltenham win. And as soon as he crossed the line, we went into single figures, and he was still very popular. He ended up 5-1 favourite with ourselves. Now, we've gone non-runner no bet, and we're 5 places. With that in mind, 5-1 looks a very fair price. But interestingly enough, as we record this, Sidelak has now been cut into co-favourite for the race, 5-1. Obviously, the Yannicka form, I think, is really interesting. The horse bolted up Tuesday at Exeter in the Holden Gold Cup. There's certainly, I think, a lot of expectation around Slate House, but as you said, it is by no means least a one-runner race, if you like. Spirit of the Games at one stage was an anti-post favourite with ourselves. He's now 7-1 at time of recording. And we've got St Calvados in there, 10 bar. Knocknanas for Gary Moore, who won it last year. Barry Nalco, 10-1. Up from them for Joseph O'Brien, 10-1. And then bigger the rest of the field, but a competitive one. Yeah,
as you say, with Slate House, punters seem to be latching on to last month's Cheltenham form. But there isn't just that in there. St Calvados is another you quickly mentioned. He seems to be... Is there any money for him as well? He was visually impressive at Cheltenham last month too.
Yeah, he was cut initially off the back of that. And I think a few people may have their enthusiasm tempered with the defection of ASO in the race. Obviously, St Calvados now, should he run, has to shoulder top weight. Harry Whittington was pretty positive about him. I think the one negative of the BetVictor Media Day he didn't pick up on was the trip. He said, obviously, he's not quite gone the trip yet. He believes he'll get it. He thinks he's improved plenty for the Windop. And I can't fault the run he put in at Cheltenham. Showed he handled, he probably handles any kind of conditions really with a horse of his profile. And he's been highly tried, and a race of this really should be within his compass, I'd say, to be competitive.
Okay, thanks for that, Sam. And not only at Cheltenham there's good racing this weekend, we've also got Grade 1 action over in Ireland with the Moriana Hurdle. The headline out there that is Classical Dream, last year's Supreme winner, and plenty, Sam, fancy him for the Champion Hurdle next year.
Yeah, and you can understand why. 3-1 market leader with ourselves in a renewal that is obviously sadly lacking last year's Victor. Beevers next in the betting at 6-1. Pentland Hills, triumph winner 10. Fusel Raffles, I was at Wincanton, and I was deeply unimpressed with his performance. However, I think it's a big caveat, and it's probably a wide discussion point, I'm sure you might touch on the podcast. Nicky Henderson's horses have been winning without perhaps blowing them away. Santini, a prime example of that. I actually think maybe we'll reflect back on that, and it's a better run than we all think. He's in there at 12-1, and it's much bigger than the rest. But Classical Dream, if he turns up in the Morgana, he's going to go off a favourite. He'll be a short price, I'm sure. Those races do tend to cut up quite significantly over in Ireland. Obviously, it doesn't help that Willie has the lion's share of the horses that could be in there against him. They'll want to try and keep a few of them apart, I'm sure. 3-1 for the Champion Hurdle. Does he represent value? Should he be the market leader? I think he's the most likely that will take the division by storm. You know what you're getting with Beevers, and 6-1 perhaps is a really fair price about him to bounce back.
Cheers, Sam. And while we've got you as well, we've seen some really impressive performances over in Ireland over the last couple of days, perhaps none more so than from Honeysuckle and Andy Dufresne. Has there been any movement in their respective markets for next year's Cheltenham Festival?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there with the two that I'd have certainly picked out over the last sort of 7 days action. With regards to Gordon Elliott's trained novice hurdler, really entered into the Ballymore market at 12s now. Appreciate he's also got the favourite in there. But like I say, I was really taking the promise. I've actually asked the traders to put him in our Albert Bartlett market as well when they get the chance. And I think he'll go in around a 14 shot for that. The only reason I want him in there is I think he can win over any of those trips. I think Mark Walsh said something, you could always step him back down to 2. He just looks very versatile, very impressive. And considering, I think sometimes we see these horses in Ireland with maiden hurdles that are perceived as weak. I don't think that was a weak maiden hurdle at all. I think there was some very talented prospects in that field as well as the winner. Perhaps none as good as him, but I think for him to go off even, win the way he did, he just really took the eye. Honeysuckle, you mentioned, BetVictor ambassador Rachel Blackmore did mention in her blog with ourselves that she was very excited for the horse to run. She was very pleased that Berry House got rearranged, and Julie delivered in nice style. We trimmed her slightly for the mare's hurdle, now 9-2. Obviously Benny Dejou heads the betting in that race, and for all she was the winner bar the fall at the last year, I don't think Honeysuckle's that far behind. I really like this horse, and I think the mare's hurdle, people sometimes dismiss it, and I'm a bit biased because I used to work for the sponsors. But I do think from time to time it throws up a real epic renewal. You think back to the days where you had Applejade, Rimber and Mag and Lamini all coming over the last couple of hurdles together. I do think it's a race that can provide some real interest, and it'll be fascinating to see what happens between the pair of them. And if they keep apart before the race, I think we'll have quite the showdown.
Yeah, all we need is a Willie Mullins trained, Rich Ritchie owned mare in the race, and then we know that there's going to be trouble, because both Beanie Dejeu and Danny Power have managed to fall at the final flight in the last few years. Yeah,
it's one of those races that I think favourite backers had a bit of a torrid time in that sense. It's been frustrating when you think back to the 4-timer that Annie Power people were waiting on. I've been very lucky. I've been to many sporting events and arenas and seen plenty of drama. And I cannot liken the moments that horse fell to anything else that I've ever attended. It was one of those you had to be there moments, and the bookmakers got off lightly that day. But there you go. It was one of those. And the main thing was the horse was fine and went on to race again and give us a few more special moments. But the season really is hotting up now. We've got plenty of markets up on BetVictor.com, including the National Hunt Chase Triple Crown, if you think any horse is capable of doing that. I think it's a tall ask, lost in translation, the most popular bet on the site for that. And we've got price it ups as well to keep an eye on for the daily specials and that sort of thing. And yeah, it's all roads really lead to the sort of constant Cheltenham countdown now, Nick, I'd say. And I'm looking forward to listening to hear what you guys are picking out for us.
Thank you very much for joining us, Sam. You mentioned that was a good day for you guys a couple of years ago. Hopefully Saturday is a terrible one for you and the punters get plenty of winners.
Yeah, I suspect that might well be the case looking at the fields, and 5 places not running no bet. It's going to be tough for us, but I hope people enjoy the day.
Great to hear from Sam Boswell there from BetVictor, giving us the lowdown on the betting. Now, Nick, I need to admit a bit of a mistake on my part. It's just in regards to Count Meribel. I've made a mistake. I'm only human at the end of the day. When I said he was undefeated over his previous 2 runs over course and distance, that is not true, because one of those runs was at Carlisle. So that was that was my mistake there. So I just thought I'd chuck that out there, because people listening are going, well, actually, that's not even a stat in itself.
Well, it's the 2 C's, Bobby. That it's easy to mix up, and you have me sold anyway, and it doesn't hinder his chances. He's still got a great chance on Saturday.
He certainly has. Right, look ahead to Sunday then, and the Shloer Chase. Defi Desoy, very prominent in the market. Is he the one to beat, or are you looking at Politolog or So Royal? What do you think?
Could be the race of the weekend, this, couldn't it?
Certainly could.
I think it has been for the last few years. I mean, whenever anyone mentions the Shloer Chase, I just think of Sprinter Saka in his Lazarus season.
Yes.
It built the foundations for one of the most emotional wins ever. And this is a humdinger. I've looked at it, and I've looked at it again, and I've looked at it a third time, and it is really difficult to separate the 3 in the market. I think we're, at the time of recording on Tuesday evening, it's 2-1, definitely deciding Politolog, 5-2. So roll. We'll start with the latter because he won this last year, and he hasn't won since, but there's no shame in that because he's been running really well at what is a very high level, Grade 1 level. He ran a marvellous race to chase home Altior in the Champion Chase in third. This is a tougher renewal, but if he runs to the level that he did in the Champion Chase, he'll be bang there. I think it's worth noting that he's won on reappearance 3 times in the past, and I just have a bit of a feeling that this is his cup final. This is his main race of the season, and I'm edging towards So Raw here, even though he's the outsider of the three of the 3 principals. But to give a note to the other 2, I mean, Defi Desoy, he's a dual Grade 1 winning novice from last season. Yeah. Really well, and he was unlucky to bump into Chacon Boswell.
I'll go with that, Nick. I'll go with that.
The vibes from him seem to be that he is something serious in the Champion Chase division. It is worth noting. I think this could come down to who's the most. It's worth noting that Defi Desoy has been beaten in each of his last 2 reappearance runs, and Politolog as well. He's a bona fide top class chaser. He was in second in front of So Raw in the Champion Chase before finding the best horse in training, Min, far too good at Aintree. We know what he's all about as well. We know all 3 of them really well. Paul Nicholls is the master of picking up these pots. He's going to have him ready. He's won 3 times on reappearance himself, Politolog. The only thing that puts me off him slightly is I think this is over 2 miles. It might prove just a smidge too short of his optimum trip. So with little niggles for Defi Desoy and Politolog, and bearing in mind that this could be the be-all and end-all for So Royal, and that I think that St Calvados, who we'll give a quick mention to, is going to go for the BetVictor Gold Cup, So Royal is the one to beat on Sunday.
So Royal then is the selection of Nick, and that is the end of the podcast. That went really fast, that didn't it?
It did, although I've got the clock on me on my computer, and it seems to be the usual sort of length. So we just enjoy each other's company, Bobby.
We certainly do indeed, and we hope you've enjoyed it just as much as myself and Nick have as well. We'll be back next week. Of course, we'll be looking ahead to the Betfair Chase, and just very, very briefly, Nick, looking at what potentially could turn up for that Grade 1 chase. It looks set to be an absolute corker.
Yeah, Lost in Translation looks likely to be there, and a certain A named Altior is also in the list. Now, he will probably go to Ascot, but crikey, it's enough to make the mouth water.
And Ballyoptic as well, of course, winning the Charlie Hall a couple of weeks ago. He may turn up. I won't say he should. He may turn up also in the Betfair Chase. But from myself and from Nick as well, thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you all next week.